Hi, and welcome back to Formation Fridays at the Church of Ascension in St. Agnes in DC. For this Formation Friday series, we are going to be talking about reading the Apocrypha, following up on our earlier series this Easter season on reading the Bible from different voices. In the first video, we're going to talk about a brief explanation of the Apocrypha. In our second video, we'll talk about the contents of the apocryphal books, and in the third video, it'll be suggestions for reading the Apocrypha. We're really excited that you can join us. So, what is the Apocrypha? You might open your Bible and find a whole bunch of books stuck between the Old Testament and the New Testament that you don't find are read very often in church. Or you might open your Bible and find that it goes straight from Malachi, the last book of the Old Testament, to Matthew, the first book of the New Testament. Because if you're Protestant, some of our Bibles have the Apocrypha in them, and some of our Bibles don't. So what's going on with these books? They are termed sometimes the books between the Testaments. And that's because they are physically placed between the Old Testament and the New Testament in Bibles. And they mostly were written in the time period between when the Old Testament books were written and when the New Testament books were written. According to scholar Daniel Harrington, they also, quote, provide a theological bridge between the testaments in that they give a sample that illustrates how the traditions of the Hebrew scriptures were carried forward, and they greatly illumine the world in which Jesus and the New Testament writers lived and worked, end quote. None of these books were considered canonical in Judaism, or in other words, they've never been accepted as part of the Hebrew Bible. However, except for the book titled 4 Maccabees, all of them have been considered canonical at some point by at least one Christian sect. And so now we have this question of, are they canonical or are they not canonical? To help us understand this, there's 3 terms that we need to define a little more precisely, and those are proto-canonical, deuterocanonical, and apocryphal. So proto-canonical is the term that is used to describe books that have always been accepted into the canon. And so these would be the books of the Hebrew scriptures, or what we call the Old Testament. Deuterocanonical are the books that were debated and accepted into the canon later. And so these books are going to be some of the books that we call apocryphal, but not all of the books that we call apocryphal. Because some of the books that we call apocryphal were accepted at one point, but when the churches finally said, okay, we need to make our final decision, they were not included. And so the term apocryphal actually literally means hidden. And it's not really clear why these books are called apocryphal. We just know that this term has been used to describe them for centuries. And so of the books that we're talking about, all of them can be considered apocryphal. Some of them can be considered deuterocanonical. And they are in contrast to the proto-canonical works that everybody agrees are part of the Bible. And there's no discussion about those. So, once we get to the categories of Apocrypha, there's 2 different types. One are full books, and the other are smaller selections that are either inserted into books or added onto the ends of books. And so I'm going to put up a chart that's going to show all the books that we see as part of the Apocrypha. And if you look, you'll see on one side we've got full books, and on the other side we've got insertions and appendices, with one exception, because at the very bottom of the side that says insertions appendices, you'll see 4 Maccabees, and that is an entire book, but it has never been considered part of the canon, and it has always only been used as an appendix. And so that's why that one's there. That is actually the only book on these lists that has never been part of the canonical Christian scriptures by any Christian sect. All of these other ones have been considered part of them, the Christian scriptures, at some point by some Christian community somewhere. So you'll notice that I've divided these both sides into a top row and a bottom row. And on the top row, we have the books that are considered canonical by the Roman Catholic Church. And so there we have Tobit, Judith, the Wisdom of Solomon, a book called Ecclesiasticus, or also known as Sirach, and note that this is different from the book of Ecclesiastes. The name's really similar, but they're two different books. The book of Baruch and the books of 1st and 2nd Maccabees. On the other side, for insertions, we have the book of Esther, which is a really interesting case because there's two versions of the book of Esther, one in Hebrew and one in Greek. And the one in Greek is significantly longer. And so for the Roman Catholic Church, they consider the Greek version to be canonical. We also have two additions to the book of Daniel, the Prayer of Azariah and the Song of the Three Jews, which are in Daniel 3, and Susanna and Bel and the Dragon, which is in Daniel 13 to 14. We also have the letter of Jeremiah, which is added on to the book of Baruch. So if you're reading a Roman Catholic Bible, you will see all of these works added in throughout the Old Testament books and accepted as fully part of the canon. Then we also have these other books and insertions. We've got the books of 1st and 2nd Esdras. We've got 3rd Maccabees. We have the Prayer of Manasseh, which is inserted into 2nd Chronicles 33. And we have Psalm 151 and the book of 4 Maccabees, which I mentioned earlier. And so these have at some point been considered part of the canon, but are not any longer. We can also note that the Eastern Orthodox Church generally follows the same pattern as the Roman Catholic, although not exactly. So they're more similar to the Roman Catholics than they are to the Protestants. So, how did the canon of the Old Testament develop, and how does this impact what we know about the Apocrypha? So, in the 2nd and 3rd century, the Church Fathers tended to accept the Apocrypha. Tertullian defended it. Origen didn't list the apocryphal books as part of the Old Testament, but did use them in his writings. It's when we get to the 4th and 5th centuries that there starts to be some discord. Augustine did accept the apocryphal books in the 4th and 5th centuries. Athanasius, like Origen, didn't list them as part of the Old Testament, but did use them in his writings. But then we get to Jerome, who's also a church father from the 4th and 5th centuries, and he was the first one to translate the Bible into Latin. And when he did that, he wrote a preface for every book that distinguished between the ones that were canonical, the ones that are part of the Hebrew scriptures, and the ones that are apocryphal, the ones that are not accepted as part of the Hebrew scriptures. However, even though this was the standard text that remained the standard text of the Latin Bible throughout the Middle Ages, sometimes when the Bible was copied, copyists dropped out his prefaces. And so over time, it became accepted that the Latin text of the Vulgate just included all of these books. And it was that way through the Middle Ages and into the time of the Reformation. Then, once we get to the Proto-Reformation, we get Wycliffe translating the Latin Vulgate into English at the end of the 14th century. And he included all of the apocryphal books except 2nd Esdras, but he distinguished between the Hebrew canon and the others in the introduction. So he followed Jerome's pattern of making a note saying which ones were canonical and which ones were not. Once the Reformation was in full swing, the Protestants decided to drop the apocryphal books. It was important to them to decide what was canonical because there were some doctrines that they objected to that were based in the apocryphal books. For instance, the idea of purgatory and praying for the dead or giving masses for the dead is based in a passage in 2nd Maccabees 12. They acknowledge the value of the books of Wisdom, Ecclesiasticus, Judith, Tobit, and 1st and 2nd Maccabees, but considered the others to be of lesser value. And so after the Reformation happened, the Roman Catholic Church said, okay, we got to make a decision about these books. And that's when, in the Council of Trent in 1546, they made the distinctions that we discussed earlier and said, these ones are canonical and these ones are valuable, but we're not going to consider them canonical. So to sum up, this is where we're at today. Within the apocryphal books, there are two different levels of authority. There are some that are considered deuterocanonical by the Roman Catholic Church, and others that are just considered valuable works written by authors who wanted to teach us about God. For Protestants, we don't tend to accept any of these books as canonical, but there are some denominations, like Anglicans and Episcopalians, who do use them in worship from time to time. So tune in next week when we talk about what's going on in these apocryphal books. What's their content? What are they about? See you then.